Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for your time here today as we have very important discussions, whether it's NAFTA, whether it's Chorus, whether it's various trade issues that we know are important to American producers, particularly Nebraska ag producers. That is my focus, but we know that consumers live in every one of our districts, obviously, and we always want to be mindful of that. As it does relate to agriculture, certainly I've expressed to you and I've expressed to the President as well as that as we modernize our trade agreements, certainly I appreciate that. If we could also obviously do no harm to those areas we have done particularly well with, namely agriculture. Energy has been discussed as well. 45% of Nebraska's agriculture exports go to Canada and Mexico, so it's no surprise that NAFTA is important as we do move forward. And I just continue to strongly urge you to keep this in mind of how important these exports are, especially as I can appreciate the need to close the gap, the trade gaps that do exist. One thing, agriculture exports do help us on narrowing those gaps, and I hope that we can continue to expand our international reach and expand international markets for agriculture. Briefly, the President touched on the possibility of re-engaging the countries in TPP. I have two questions. That would be one of them, is if you could elaborate perhaps or reflect on the potential of re-engaging a TPP that, as you know, has moved forward without the United States. And then also the President has touched on the bilateral trade agreements that he would like to pursue, perhaps, and if you could also reflect on that and how we might be able to utilize that moving forward, whether it's with Japan or other countries that we would like to see more exports of U.S. products heading in those directions. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Congressman. First of all, we appreciate your intervention on this issue of the importance of agriculture. We completely agree with it. Not only have you raised it repeatedly here, but in all other contexts, and it's very important. It's very important to us, both in terms of the consequences of our other action on agriculture, but more importantly, probably using the trade agenda to promote agriculture. So we sit back and we talk about the fact that we have whatever it is, $140 billion worth of agricultural sales. In most of the markets we go into, we could sell vastly more. And we're really facing protectionism. And I mean, Europe is a good example. China is a good example. There's enormous, enormous opportunity. And a lot of the things that we design with that in mind. So agriculture is important. It's crazy to sit back and be defensive in agriculture, however, because the reality is we're being stopped in a lot of places from just local political pressure creating protectionism. On the issue of TPP, I guess I would say the following. So it's complicated to get in and renegotiate that. But if you analyze TPP, you have 11 countries in TPP. With respect to 6 of them, right now, we already have a free trade agreement. So the idea of upgrading that and getting those in a position where you think that what you want is fine. With respect to the other 5, by far the most important is Japan, which we've already raised. So I don't know what the total amount is. Japan is maybe a $5 trillion economy. I'd bet all the rest of them together weren't $1 trillion, because the next biggest one is Malaysia, which is just over $300 billion, and then Vietnam is the next one after that. So I'm saying of the 5, if you got an agreement with Japan, you've essentially solved the whole problem. Certainly if you got one with Japan, Vietnam, which some people have suggested, or Malaysia, you've basically taken care of 95% of what's outside of the U.S. ambit right now that's in the TPP sphere. So I think when people think about TPP, sometimes they think of it as something that we're not a part of. We already have FTAs with 6 of these countries, and I'm not to say that they can't be improved, and they should be improved. But the way I analyze it, I say, number one, you have a problem because you want to work it out with Japan, because they're by far the biggest, the 3rd biggest economy in the world, and by far the biggest of those. And then somebody's got to sit down and decide, do you allocate resources to to Malaysia or to allocate resources to Vietnam, and there are reasons for that. You can argue all of them, and our view is that that's the job this deputy has to do. We have to come to grips with that. Japan is clear, but the next tier we have to come to grips with that, and we have to get the opinion of this committee.